Welcome to the Belonging Podcast by Elevate Villages. I'm your host, Melissa Kay, and we are here today with Pastor Shawn. He's the pastor of Taka Church, which is east of Washington, D.C. He is a musician artist, and he's a fierce advocate for the marginalized. I'm so happy to have him with us today. Pastor Shawn, welcome to the Belonging Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here. I appreciate being invited. It's fun.
Let's jump in. Let's just start in the deep end. When was a time that maybe one of the biggest times you can feel in your body that you felt like you didn't belong?
Well, listen, let me tell you something about me. Okay.
Please.
I'm a person who can do a lot of things. I am really good at a bunch of different stuff. I'm Pastor Shawn, the church planter, the sort of like you see, sort of public theologian, started in ministry as a Christian hip hop artist, all of that stuff that puts me in like the Christian hip hop world, the traditional church world as I grew up. I'm also entrepreneur, also, employee. So the corporate world, the progressive Christian world, the Black church world, the tech world, and most things that I'm into, I'm really, really good at. But the problem with that is most spaces I'm in are smaller for me than my brain is, right? And so generally speaking, I don't necessarily fit in or I have to shrink sort of to fit in. Not saying there's anything wrong with the people that are in those spaces, but it's sometimes you have to be, when you're in church, you're kind of a church person and you don't want to talk entrepreneurship in church because nobody here understands you. Or when you're in a entrepreneur space, you don't want to talk pastoral in an entrepreneur space because nobody understands you. But when your brain is firing 12 things simultaneously, you can't help but to think about that. So belonging for me has always been trying to find a space that fits me when no space when I'm the puzzle piece. I'm the puzzle piece that doesn't fit in any of these slots. So that has been my life journey. I've always been like this. I've always been multi-talented, always into stuff, very neurodivergent. And so that has been my experience. So like when you say find a place you don't belong, I'm like, count the ways, no place. Right?
Yeah.
It's like no place. Well, I've never really been like, I've been in church all my life, but I've never really been churchy. I don't know how to explain
Okay.
that.
That's a good explanation.
I've been like, I've been there my entire life. I've been in corporate executive world, but not necessarily fitting in the corporate exec lifestyle. Like everybody, hey, let's go to happy hour. I don't want to. Like I'm not a happy hour person. Like I know I don't hang out like in that, in that particular world. So I don't fit into the social structure of this, even though I do the job very well. But when it comes to the social structure, I don't fit into that very well. So I think my entire life has really been a life of trying to figure out where it is I do belong, because most of these places I stick out like a sore thumb. I was ordained as an elder in a apostolic Pentecostal environment. In this particular environment, this particular wing of the Black church, they dress up for everything, right? They wear nice shoes to go to the gym, right? You're like, this is inappropriate, but they dress up for everything. I wear jeans and polos and when I come to church, it's like I don't want to dress like you. That doesn't make me feel like I'm being my authentic self. So there I stick out, I stuck out all the time, like the guy that won't fit in purposely. So that is my life experience.
So what I'm hearing is that in order to belong, you have to sort of like turn up a part of you and dampen a different part of you, where you feel like you might belong a little bit, the way I think belongs here and this part belongs over there, never finding a place where all of you truly belongs. The tensions between the music and the entrepreneurialism and the faith, and where's a place or a person who can hold all of that and let you fully be you when you're there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly it.
Have you ever found a spot like that, even just for a moment, that you're like, wow, all of me gets to be here?
I think the plight of my life was to create the space that I wanted to be in. I think one of the plights of my life is creating spaces for people who may not specifically fit any particular place, where the place you create is a place that it doesn't matter who you are, bring all of you to the space and you're accepted and you're loved, no matter what that means. And so I think that has been my plight, to really create a space I needed growing up. Now, there have been people that I feel like I belong, who allow me to be me. Right. But I don't know if there's been a collective corporate space that could really
Okay.
handle all of what it means to be around me.
Yeah. Hmm. Is that where Taka Church came out of? You trying to create a space where you could feel that and wanting to bring others in where they could fully be authentically them in that space?
I think that's what the culture of it comes from, for sure. That's where a lot of the yeah, yes, the culture of Taka comes from that, and just sort of understanding Jesus and understanding how he wasn't um, interested in the things that everyone else was interested in. He wasn't interested in being a part of the clique or the crew or he wasn't interested in being a part of the religious elite. He wasn't interested in being a part of the powerful. He was interested in the ones who were outcast. He was interested in the ones who didn't feel like they belonged anywhere. He was interested in those people. He was interested in
Mm-hmm.
the tax collector and the poor, and he was interested in the widow, and he was interested in all, the sick. So all of the people in which weren't accepted in society, he was interested in them. And so that's how I feel. I'm interested in the ones on the margins, right? Like, I'm interested in the ones who have been pushed out, because a lot of times people are pushed away because they are different. So, like, differences is what puts people into the margins. And when you look into the margin, as somebody who wasn't accepted because they didn't work for one particular group of people, and because they don't work for that group of people, it's like, you're quote unquote the outcast.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You've brought up, I have 3 different directions I want to go. So let me choose one at a time here.
This is what happens when
So
you deal with me. It's just like neurodivergent, and it's like I'm
I love
going.
it. Let's start with neurodiversion then.
Sure.
You say you're neurodivergent, and I've heard a lot of different sort of definitions of it. How do you, what's your experience with being neurodivergent, and how could somebody who's not, how could they understand you better?
um Patience. But but so my experience with neurodivergent is being ADHD, right?
Okay.
um and I am 46 years old, and I didn't know that I was ADHD until I was 42. And so my entire life, I have been ADHD. And I think part of my struggle, my experiences in life, come from this way that I am, and having to navigate that through everyone else's definition of normality, right?
Hmm.
And trying to be normal, and wondering why I couldn't do, or I wasn't built like everybody else was built,
Yeah.
right? My brain fires so fast, so much faster than my mouth. And so there are times that I'm just not, I cannot focus on anything. My dopamine is spent. Can't focus on anything. And I think that growing up through adulthood, it was a constant struggle of, why am I not normal?
Mm.
And so because of that, I think that kind of shaped when I was diagnosed with ADHD. I was like, this makes so much sense. Like this makes so much sense as to why all of that is. And so I really dug deep. The reason I'm happy telling people about being neurodivergent is because when I found out about myself, it was such a relief. It was such a understanding of which direction I could go and understand this about myself. Not that I want to take medication or anything like that, because I actually don't want to be normal. At 42 years old, at 46 years old, I've accepted my abnormalities. Like I don't, this is not even that normality isn't fun. You should have caught me when I was
Yeah.
12. And
Yeah.
so, and so, yeah,
But in
that's
a way, thank goodness they didn't.
right.
Like,
Right.
this is
Absolutely.
you. This is the gift you bring to the world.
Right. It is a
Um,
gift. It is a gift and not a curse. It is
right.
a gift.
So, okay, so that brings me to the second thing I was thinking. When we talk about belonging, when you got that diagnosis, it sounds like it relaxed your nervous system a little bit. Like, oh, okay, there's a reason.
Mhm.
And in a little bit, you're like, okay, this is a place I found a little bit of belonging in knowing that my brain is working different than, somebody else's or people I've been around. And that's why I felt different. I felt like I didn't fit in. But now I fit into this wider group of
Mhm.
being neurodivergent, right?
Right.
But then on the flip side, when we give things labels, now other people don't belong to you. I'm not coming to a conclusion on this. This is my brain
Sure.
wandering. When we give something a label, while the person labeled feels a little bit of belonging within that label,
Mhm.
what it's doing is it's creating an us and them. So now we're different,
Or yeah, never a group.
So this whole topic of belonging is so nuanced because in order to belong one place, it may create that you don't belong somewhere else or someone else doesn't belong
Mhm.
with you. How does knowing you belong to yourself help you work through all of the places that you don't belong?
I think knowing what drives you, right? Knowing how you function, getting to know yourself, even if that's a life path, right?
Mhm.
I feel like I'm gonna figure something else out about myself in 5 years. Like, like
Absolutely.
it's a life journey to know
Yes.
yourself. And yourself changes over time. And so the self you knew 20 years ago is not the self you know today. And so I think that knowing yourself, and for me, knowing yourself helped me navigate the groups, the different places in which
Mhm.
I felt I didn't belong. And so it gave me a piece about the places I felt I didn't belong. Oh, I didn't belong there because I didn't know myself because I was trying to fit in.
Mm,
I could not explain to them why I did not fit in the same way that they
yeah.
did. And so they would look at me like, what's wrong with him? He needs to
Mm,
be more like us. And a lot of times it's like, I can't be like y'all. But these days, I'm like, I'm too ADHD to do that. And now everybody understands, oh, this is how he's functioning. And so the more we get to know someone, right? The
mhm.
more we get to know someone, we accept that person for who they are. The more that person pretends that they're like you, the more you expect for them to be like you. And then they fail you because they're not like you. They
Right.
disappoint you because they're not like you. And the truth is, relationship, and that's why I preach so much about love. It's why my whole church is built on the idea of love. Because because the vulnerability of relationship comes through the intentionality of wanting to love another human being, and the vulnerability in relationship will allow you to have love for an individual for who they are and what makes them fire, and you begin to accept, one, that they're different than you, but two, that we're strengthened by our differences, not necessarily by the things that bring us together, but we're sharpened by our differences, and we can and build upon that. My best friend may be completely opposite of me, but that actually makes it work, right? Because I need a left
Right.
wheel and a right wheel. Like if you know what I mean, like I need a left
Yeah.
shoe and a right shoe, a left foot and a right foot. They're opposites, but
Yeah.
not really. You know what I'm saying? Like
But they're both shoes.
they're
Yeah.
sh they're both shoes, and they're both doing a job just on a different side.
Mhm. Mm, that's beautiful. I love you bringing it back to love because if we can truly love someone, then we don't need them to validate who I am by being like me and by
Right.
agreeing with everything I say, but actually finding delight in how are you different than me and what can I learn from that,
Yeah.
is really cool. I think you touched on something really important that I've noticed in my own life, that in the times I felt like I least belonged, often it like now, decades later, I can look and go, oh, I didn't understand why I felt that. And I didn't have the vocabulary or the words or the communication ability to communicate that to the people that made me feel most vulnerable and most outside.
Hmm.
If I could go back, I could have those conversations and they would probably understand me. So
Right.
sometimes I think that as humans, that's part of the complexity. No matter how much I love you, if we're in different seasons, if we know different things, if we don't have a common set of words we can use to understand each other, that can
Absolutely.
create a lot of that misunderstanding or division or
Right.
us and them.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that is important to think about or to know that is that to me, belonging is not agreement. It's not necessarily that we agree on stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, um, I have a church full of people who don't agree on everything, right? Like, we don't
Nice.
agree on everything. And it's not necessary that we agree on every point in the cosmos of everything. We've got our church is built mostly on virtual members who are states away in different places. And so they've got cultural differences and all of those things, but they come together in our virtual space and they are accepting of each other and know that
Mm.
we are from two completely different sides of the country, but we all belong here, right? We've got a lot of people deconstructing faith or finding out the facts or the details about Christianity and finding out why unhealthy groups are made or that's everything. We have a lot of people who do that in our church. There are a lot of people who are solid on the foundation of their faith, but we are all in this one space because to accept that we are all different. I've got former evangelicals and LGBTQ and traditional believers and doubters and seekers, and we're just all here. And I think there's an understanding, there's a realization that to belong does not necessarily mean we all agree. We just all have to have a consensus that it's okay to be who you are.
Mm.
And I think that's one of the most important parts about doing ministry anyways, is really can people be safe around here and not be the same as you?
Safety. I like that you brought that up. What role does safety play in helping people feel like they belong?
I think safety is I think is I want to say primary. I think safety is primary. Um,
How do you create safety for someone? If someone new is in your place, how do we make them feel safe?
I think acceptance is the first thing. Is no matter who you are, where you come from, how you got here, none of this matters. I think what matters is that we are accepting of you regardless of any of this. Uh, I can tell you this story. This is a fun story. On Valentine's Day, we had I had this really fun thing that I wanted all the couples to like dance, right?
Okay.
And so I just kind of brought up this Bright Night song, and this couple has walked in. These two ladies, they're a couple that they were a queer couple that walked in, and or whatever. And so when I told everybody to stand up, and I was pointing out like, you guys stand here, you guys stand here, blah, blah, and this couple they were there, and I don't know. I didn't remember everybody there that morning was straight, but I don't know that they felt comfortable. I think they were just kinda checking us out, and I'm like, "Mm-mm, y'all a couple come on now. Stand right here. We gonna dance to this Bright Night song," and it was sort of like a beautiful thing, and it was like, you kinda know that they were
Mm.
like, "Oh, okay, this is fine." It's
It's
like,
okay for us to be us. Yeah.
to exist. Yes, it's perfectly fine that you exist and that you love, and this is about love, and so
Yeah.
come here and be in love and, be okay with it. And so I think stuff like that is how a person or people can feel like they belong somewhere. It's like, I accept you for who you are. I'm not here to argue whether or not I agree or disagree with you. That's not the, who cares? I accept you for who you are. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of that um, creates safety. That creates a person feeling safe around you, safe to talk to you, safe to exist in your presence and not feel like they are playing defense or being defensive or having to argue their existence or their truth or their reality with you.
What a great example of creating safety. Thank you. You often talk about division.
Yes.
Do you think that division is the opposite of belonging?
No, I think division is, I don't think it's the opposite of belonging. I think it's the toxic version of belonging, right? Because, because
Wow.
Because when if belonging is acceptance, division is acceptance of certain people on a certain thing, and then creating a wedge between that person and another group. So if that makes sense.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
so I hate talking about politics, but this is the easiest thing I can think about right now. There
Sure.
is Republican and there are Democrats, right? If you are a Democrat and you're in the Democrat circle, you feel like you belong because this is where my people are, right? There are
Absolutely.
Republicans, and when you are in this group, you feel like you belong. When a politician turns a disagreement of policy into a wedge between people, right? Creating division between the people and not just
Hmm.
disagreement in political policies, which is everybody's going to have that, right?
Sure.
But now we are seeing people as enemies, or we're seeing people as radicals, or we're seeing people as a problem instead of saying that we have differences of political opinions. Now it's us versus them, or my side versus your side. We wedge an issue in the middle and call you immoral on this side and call you extremist on that side. And all of a sudden, the same thing that could bring us all together is the very thing being used as a weapon to group people together and shoot this weapon at another group of people. And so it's like, it's not necessarily the opposite of belonging, because in order to build, you need belonging. And
It's true.
I think a lot of the toxic uh politics in our country, a lot of the toxic politics first starts with belonging of people who felt like they didn't belong. And you take that feeling and you weaponize that feeling and
Ooh,
you manipulate those people, and now they have a group that they belong to, and they're weapons against their army now, and not thinking from a human being point of view. They're thinking as an army and a weapon. And so it's so in my particular in my point of view, when you ask the question like, is it belonging, it's like it is belonging, because those people feel like they belong in that
absolutely.
group.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, I hate
Like
using
the
political.
toxic side of belonging. That's, oh no, I hadn't thought of it from that lens, and that's really powerful. I had thought of that from the lens, like watching the NBA weekend, the NBA finals just happened before we recorded this podcast. And you had the Knicks and the Spurs. And the beautiful thing was, like, you could see like New York coming together, and it it felt like belonging. But then the way my brain was, I'm like, wow, but for all of the people who aren't fans or Spurs fans, they don't belong. And so again, and it's not, I don't think it's nearly as toxic as what's happening politically, but it's not true belonging because it excludes.
I think I felt like I belonged in New York this weekend,
Yeah.
right? I felt like I belong. I've
Nice.
never lived in New York. I'm not a Knicks fan. I'm not really a basketball fan. So,
Okay.
so, um, but to watch the celebration, I felt like
Yeah.
I was a part of it, right? I think
True.
because it's a competition, right? Because this is based on a competition.
Mhm.
You have your winners and you have your losers. Somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. This is a game,
Yeah.
right? I don't think the celebration of the winner is the exclusion of the loser. And when the celebration of the winner becomes the exclusion of the loser, that uh, becomes, because as a loser, I can celebrate the winner,
Okay, yeah.
right?
And
The
I
loser,
noticed that actually in San Antonio, with that final being in San Antonio, I noticed afterwards, I was like, wow, even though they lost, they're still being really supportive and sticking around and like, like that
that's called
energy.
good sportsmanship, right?
Yeah,
Like, good
absolutely.
sportsmanship
You're right.
is when you can celebrate the winner even though you're not the winner. So I don't think
Hmm.
that because we have a winner and a loser, because this is a game and it's sports and there was a winner, a loser, whoever got more points is the winner. I don't think that now when you become bitter about it and you use that, emotion, that, that negative emotion to manipulate, your people to gather in this to become hateful because you lost, then
Mm.
that becomes the toxic version of belonging. But I don't think because
That's
a
good.
loser loses doesn't mean you can't celebrate the person who won. I could celebrate the person who won. I wasn't involved at all. I was very excited about the Knicks and watching them sing in the streets and being happy that the mayor put the game up so everybody in the streets could watch it. And I was like, this is
Everywhere.
so
It was so
amazing.
cool.
Yes, it
Yeah.
was cool. I could celebrate with them. If it was the Spurs, I probably could celebrate with them too. And so the Spurs, even though they lost, if they're healthy, they'll say, "Hey, we'll try again next season. Then
Hmm.
we're going to celebrate the winners this season. We'll try again next season." So I don't think that's is to disinclude the person who didn't win in that particular context. I think that's a great example because we haven't heard any negativity coming from the Spurs. We haven't
Right.
heard any curses of the Knicks coming from the Spurs. And so we know a good sportsmanship says there's a winner and there's a loser, and we celebrate the winner and we try harder next time. And I think that's still belonging.
I think so. I think you're right. This is why you're on the podcast. I love how I don't think I've had a guest yet mention toxic belonging. And I'm going to now, like, my brain's going to be there for a while now. And I think you're right. If now we expand the lens from sports, so we know that even though somebody loses in sports, they can still belong in a greater sense and a good sportsmanship and being happy for the winners. So if we're in the wider world and someone feels like they don't belong, hmm, now I'm trying to figure out where I'm trying to draw a parallel. So I'm going to stay out of politics because that has a lot of different nuances. Let's say churches. Perfect, Pastor Shawn. So let's say you have a church that is,
It's
you
might be
know,
rusty politics.
well, you're not wrong there. They're all sort of intermingled, I'm afraid. But let's say you do have one denomination and another that are relatively opposite, except you still have love. I don't know of a religion that wouldn't say love your neighbor. I'm not saying they all do it, but I think at the core, they all believe in love. The wider belonging within the divisions of churches, we're all loving. So why do we have to add that toxic spin to it and be like, oh, it has to be our way? Like, you're wrong and I'm right. You
Mm.
might be able to straighten that out for me.
I don't know if I'm saying this out because this is a this is centuries of exclusion. But I think, well, actually no, it's not. I think in the 19 let's start here. Let's go here. I got it. I
Okay.
got
Okay. Okay. Here we go.
1901. It was 1901. It was the Azusa Street revival in California, and it was a revival in which a lot of people came together, and we saw signs and miracles and wonders. This revival lasted for years, right? And what happened was there were churches birthed out of this revival, people wanting to carry the fire of God. Now, The problem is this was the US of A. And the US of A, we don't worship together as far as race in 1901. So there
Right.
were churches that came out of here, like the Church of God, which is white people, and the Church of God in Christ, which is called Kojic, which is black version of the Church of God. So if
Oh.
you go to these two churches today, which is over 100 years later, you go to these two churches, you'll find some similarities in the way that they behave, in the culture and the dancing and the music and the emotional expression. But when you go to the
Hmm.
Church of God, you see it in a white way. When you go to the Church of God in Christ, you see it in a black way because they believe in the same doctrine, but the exclusion of the culture make two completely different spaces. Whereas if you say, you know what, I'm going to a black church this week, and you go to a Kojic church, you would feel accepted. You would be like, hey, they would love the fact that you were there. They would say, oh girl, you got to learn how to do the dance like this, play the music, whatever, and you would feel accepted. And if you
Okay.
yourself today went to a church of God, again, you would feel accepted. You wouldn't think about the fact that the way these two churches were birthed were out of the pure evil racism of the US, right? And it was way more
Mm.
than two churches birthed, but I can give you the example, but it was out of the pure evil nature of the US. We were built into this thing. And so now, yes, you can individually go to these churches because maybe the individual people wouldn't think like that and the doctrine is all the same, but the nature of which what we came from divided us by color. And so now it's like there is an exclusion here and the exclusion here. I fit here. I don't fit here. And that is how some of the American denominations, the Western denominations came to be. That's why there is a black church that exists and a
Mm.
white church that exists. That's why we even think about this in that way, is because of the way that the nature of how we came into be.
I love that history. Thank you. What I'm hearing is that because the basis of the church was Jesus and love and doing good, that it seems like has prevailed over a century and a quarter. The fact that I could walk into either and be welcomed means that something was bigger than the
Right.
division that hate caused 125 years ago.
Right.
And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think that brings love and belonging a little bit closer together even.
Right.
So let's go to our final segment in this podcast for today.
Has it
How
been
do
a week?
we
Ow.
create I know the time is flying. How do we create belonging? What's our responsibility for creating belonging and how maybe have you done that?
I think that the number one responsibility, right, is understanding that we are in a divisive world
Hmm.
and not pretending like we're not. Because I think the most harmful thing is to pretend that we're not in the world that we actually are. And
Yeah.
when you know that you're living in that world, you know when it's showing up in you. But if you don't know that you're living in that world, you will pass it off like it's not happening. And I think when you recognize that it's happening, that is that is the first step. Therefore, when you're in the office and you see someone who you know doesn't fit in and they're eating alone or something like that, and you're like, "Hey, you're eating alone. Do you want to eat alone? Because I don't really want to eat alone. Do you mind if we eat together or whatever?" That is recognizing that we live in a divided world and saying that because I recognize we live in a divided world, there are some people who will live outside of whatever our normal is, and they don't fit into our group. Let me move closer to that person. To me, that is the behavior of Jesus. Move closer to this person who is
Mm.
sitting alone, who needs to be seen, who needs to be accepted, who needs to be loved. And so I think knowing your surroundings, recognizing where you are, who you are, I think that is the one of the most important things that you can do, uh, to begin to make a difference in a really, really harshly divided and polarized world.
That was a great example of the little things that we can do, just being intentional. This is where I'm comfortable. These are the peeps I know. This is where I'm going to hang. But on this, that if we want to really express love and belonging, then we have to go outside of that and make that one person welcome that's on the outside. It's easy to see them if you start looking. And
Absolutely.
you're right. Hey, come sit with me,
But
or
you'll
let me
never
sit with
look
you.
if you don't recognize the world is the way the world is, you'll never look, right? Like
Oh, true.
you never examine the world, you know? That's why
Mm,
that's why it's so easy for people to say things. I don't keep talking about race, but it's a very divisive subject, right? That's why
absolutely.
it's so easy for people to say things like, "I don't see color." The problem with you not seeing color is that color exists, right? And while it may sound easy for you to process, because if you don't see it, you don't have to accept that it
Mm,
exists, right? And so when you say something like, "I don't see color," it means that when someone is being treated unfairly, you won't say anything because you don't see color. And so you won't connect with a person that has a different experience than
mm.
you because you have blocked your mind from seeing that difference. Not that there aren't when people say, "I don't see color," it's not you're trying not to, right? Color blindness is it's a handicap, right? Like, you
I can
know,
see what you're saying because then you're not taking into account the wounds that that person has or the
yeah,
experience that they have, and you're expecting them to be just like you, which
yeah,
isn't belonging because that's you only belong to me if you're like me.
absolutely.
Oh, that's
Abs-
good, Pastor Shawn. Thank you. That was wow.
yeah.
Hmm. You can keep going. We can sit there for a second.
No, that's I mean, that's what so I think that recognizing the world that you live in and being accepting that the world is full of differences
Yeah.
and is full of people and everybody does not have to be like you and everybody does not have to agree with you and it is okay to disagree and still accept.
Mm,
It is okay to, everybody does not have to function like you and everybody can't function like you because everybody doesn't have your experiences, but just knowing the world that we're in will make us much more accepting people that will build a much bigger community of love around you because you'll be able to see people. If not, like you said, if you can't see them, you'll expect that they look just like you.
right. Right. So I'll tell you a little bit. Elevate Villages. We're
Mm,
going to be building villages for youth who've aged out of foster care.
mm.
Foster care, speaking about going roots and history, back in the late 1800s, when it all started was called the orphan train, and they were taking the street gangs, the street urchins in New York, and the wealthy didn't like to see these kids running around. They just didn't want to deal with it. So they shipped these kids to the Midwest to go work on farms. It went wrong in all sorts of ways, as you can imagine. But it's the culture that is still steady within the foster system, that it's about hiding them, keeping in the shadows. So you have youth, or you have humans who went into foster care very early, never got adopted. The parents never got reconnected or are no longer living. And now these youth are 18 or 19, and the state's like, okay, we're done. We don't have any responsibility. And now these youth who've never belonged, who've never had a steady adult relationship in their life, are somehow supposed to know how to do it. So that's what the villages are about.
I learned
Um,
that. I learned that in doing homeless work in DC
most of them
with a group that most it was like 60 or 65% of the homeless population in this city was were
had
aged
foster
out
background.
the foster system, which
Yeah.
surprised me. And I was like, yeah, because where do they go? And like where do they go when when the state no longer has to take care of them? We haven't taught them how to function in society. We haven't helped them. And
Mm-mm.
so, when we used to, there's an organization that I worked with a lot, Faithful to City, with Pastor L. Fraser White, and he would just go and he just stay on the street. And it was one night where I was filming for him, and they was like, "We're sleeping in tents tonight. I want to feel what you feel." So they went
Yeah.
to it's called Tent City. Um, that here in DC, whereas it's like a lot of homeless people that have tents. And so him and his whole crew took tents and set up with the homeless people and were
Mm,
giving out, it was really cold. He was giving out hand warmers and hot chocolate and whatever they were doing. And it's just like if you actually have conversations with those who will have conversations with you, you realize that a lot, and then for me, I can't sometimes I don't believe things, and so then I have to go back and study statistics. It's like, that can't be possible, and you go study
right.
statistics, and you realize that 63, 64, 65% of all of these homeless people have the same story, and it's like, if you don't know that, if you can't see them, if you don't listen to them, all you see is a problem of people on the street. That's
Why
all
don't
you
you
see.
just get a job? Why don't you just, yeah,
Yeah, and even if you're nice, right, you're like, "I like to give homeless people lots of money," but it's like, yeah, you can go give a homeless person $100, but if you still can't see them as a
mhm,
human and a human that has a history, and you'll never be able to realize the correlation between the homeless and the foster care program. And if you saw that correlation, you could catch that way before it became the homeless problem,
right.
and so yeah. So anyway, sorry. See, these
Yeah,
that's me.
no, you're right. It's a catastrophic loss of family, or the
Yeah.
having that, especially in the adolescent brain, like having that consistency of or relational permanency. They get out and they don't even have an adult's phone number in their phone.
Yeah.
So the villages are, that's why it's the Belonging podcast, because the villages aren't about the housing model. They're not about the education model. They're not about the workforce model. It encompasses all of those, but Elevate Villages is about belonging. How do we create conditions that they feel belonging first as they're learning all the skills they need to go into the wider world? So,
That's so good. That's so good because if you start with that, right? If you start with that, then you solve a whole lot of physical problems. Like, this it's so interesting, the, uh, the axis between emotional problems or problems with belonging and physical things that happen later on in your life. The axis between those two. And if you start there,
mhm.
if you just start there, how can I help you feel like you belong? That's so
And asking the question, not assuming I know what you need to belong, but asking
yeah,
the question.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Pastor Shawn, oh, what a beautiful time um, conversating with you today. Thank you so much for being here. Why don't you tell our audience about Taka Church and how they can find you?
Oh, well, Taka Church is a church where we found our niche, let's say, on a book that I wrote called The Doctrine of Love. And we go by a statement that love God, love yourself, love others. We understand that Jesus said that the greatest commandment is that you love God and you love your neighbor as yourself. And I make the assumption that if Jesus says love your neighbor as yourself, then you can't hate yourself. You would have to
Mm.
first love yourself too so that you can love your neighbor appropriately. And so we go by foundational principle of love God, love yourself, love others. And that is what we try to do on a regular basis. We're very accepting, affirming, a place where you come as you are with whatever you come with. It's a place to belong and a place to be loved. We're just outside of Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Maryland, and yeah, that's us.
All right. We will put some links down below so they can find you online. Pastor Shawn, thank you so much for being here and for
Thank you for
talking
having
about
me.
belonging with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a great conversation.
To my listeners, thank you for being here. You belong in this place and we want to know what you think. Please put some comments down below if you have questions for the next podcast guest or for Pastor Shawn. I know that we'll make sure we get those answered for you. And thank you so much to our patron, Dee Laughlin. Dee, without your consistent and generous support, this podcast would not be possible. Thank you for these conversations. This has been the Belonging Podcast by Elevate Villages, where we all build belonging together.